He was just trying to help a little girl fix her flat tire on the side of the road, but when black SUVs surrounded them and men in suits stepped out, Marcus realized this wasn't just any child, and his simple act of kindness was about to change everything. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story, and leave a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. We'd love to hear your story too. The engine of Marcus Rivera's pickup truck wheezed like an old man climbing stairs, the sound echoing off the pristine sidewalks of Willowbrook Heights as he navigated the winding streets back toward the highway. His hands, stained with paint and caulk from a bathroom renovation that had taken twice as long as promised, gripped the steering wheel with the kind of tired desperation that came from knowing every hour lost was money his family couldn't afford to miss. The clock on his cracked dashboard read 5:47 p.m., which meant he was already 17 minutes late to pick up Sophia from the after-school program at Lincoln Elementary. 17 minutes meant $17 in late fees money that could have bought groceries for 2 days. Marcus rubbed his eyes with the back of his hand, fighting the exhaustion that had settled into his bones like concrete. The Hendersons' bathroom project had turned into a nightmare of hidden water damage and outdated plumbing, stretching what should have been a 6-hour job into 11 hours across 2 days. He'd barely made enough to cover the cost of materials, let alone put anything meaningful toward rent. The engine coughed again, and he patted the dashboard like he was comforting an old friend. "Come on, girl," he murmured. "Just get me to Sophia, then we can both rest." The neighborhood around him was a different world, entirely one of manicured lawns that looked like they'd been trimmed with scissors, driveways wide enough to park 4 cars, and houses that could have swallowed his entire apartment complex. He'd worked in places like this before, fixing leaky faucets for people who probably spent more on wine in a week than he made in a month. They were usually kind enough, though they had a way of talking around him rather than to him, discussing their vacation plans or their children's private school achievements while he worked quietly in the background, invisible until the job was done and the check was written. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the road, filtering through oak trees that had probably been growing since before he was born. Marcus was calculating in his head gas money, late pickup fee, Sophia's school lunch account that needed refilling when he saw her. A small figure hunched beside a bright red bicycle on the sidewalk ahead, shoulders shaking with the unmistakable rhythm of tears. Even from a distance, he could see the gleam of chrome and the kind of paint job that cost more than most people's monthly car payments. Marcus slowed the truck, his contractor's instincts taking over. In his line of work, you learned to spot problems before they became disasters, and a crying child on the side of the road was definitely a problem. He pulled over about 20 feet away, the truck's engine giving one final wheeze before settling into silence. For a moment, he sat there, hands still on the wheel, knowing he should keep driving. Sophia was waiting. The late fees were piling up. This wasn't his neighborhood, wasn't his responsibility. But the little girl looked up as his truck stopped, and Marcus saw a face streaked with tears and dirt, eyes wide with the kind of fear that made his chest tighten. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old, with dark hair escaping from a ponytail and a yellow dress that had probably been pristine when the day started. Now it was smudged with grass stains and what looked like bicycle grease. Marcus killed the engine and stepped out, his work boots crunching softly on the pristine sidewalk. The girl watched him approach with the wariness of someone who'd been taught about strangers, but desperation won out over caution. Up close, he could see the problem immediately. Her front tire was completely flat, and there was a small scrape on her knee that had beaded with blood. "Hey there," Marcus said gently, crouching down to her level so he wouldn't tower over her. "I'm Marcus. Looks like you're having some bike trouble." The girl wiped her nose with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of dirt across her cheek. "It just went flat," she said, her voice small and shaky. "I was riding home from my friend's house, and then it started making this weird noise, and then I fell." She pointed to her scraped knee. Fresh tears threatening to spill over. Marcus nodded seriously, as if flat tires were matters of great importance. "That's scary when it happens. But you know what? This is exactly the kind of thing I know how to fix. I fix things for a living." He gestured toward his truck, where his toolbox was visible through the rear window. "Mind if I take a look?" The girl, he still didn't know her, nodded eagerly. "You can really fix it?" "I can try my best," Marcus said, standing and walking back to his truck. He retrieved his toolbox and a small first aid kit he kept for job site emergencies, along with a portable tire pump that had saved him more times than he could count. When he returned, the girl was examining her bicycle with the concentration of a mechanic diagnosing an engine problem. "What's your name?" he asked as he knelt beside the bike, running his hands along the tire to find the source of the puncture. "Emma," she said quietly. "Emma Walsh." "Nice to meet you, Emma Walsh. This is a beautiful bike." And it was the kind of bike Marcus could never afford for Sophia, with hand grips that probably cost more than his monthly phone bill and a frame that gleamed like jewelry under the afternoon sun. He found the problem quickly. A small nail had punctured the tire, probably picked up from some construction debris. "How far from home are you?" Marcus asked as he worked, using his multi-tool to carefully extract the nail. Emma's face crumpled slightly. "I don't know. I think I took a wrong turn after leaving Mia's house. Everything looks the same here." She gestured vaguely at the identical mansion after mansion lining the street. Marcus glanced around, taking in the neighborhood properly for the first time. Every house was a monument to wealth-sprawling lawns, circular driveways, facades that belonged in architecture magazines. Security system signs were planted discreetly in flower beds, and he noticed more than one house had gates that probably cost more than his truck. This was old money territory, the kind of place where people had gardeners and housekeepers and probably didn't know their neighbors' first names. "Well, let's get you mobile again, and then we'll figure out how to get you home safe," Marcus said, pulling out his tire repair kit. "This might take a few minutes. You okay to wait?" Emma nodded, settling down on the grass beside him. "Are you a bike doctor?" Marcus chuckled, the first genuine laugh he'd had all day. "Something like that. I fix all kinds of things: pipes, walls, bicycles, whatever people need." He worked the patch over the puncture, his movements practiced and sure. "What about you? What grade are you in?" "Third," Emma said, watching his hands work with fascination. "I go to Riverside Academy." She said it like she wasn't sure if he'd know what that was. Marcus did know. Riverside Academy was the kind of private school with a waiting list longer than a mortgage application and tuition that could buy a car. It explained the expensive bike, the designer clothes, the easy way Emma carried herself despite being lost and scared. She was growing up in a world Marcus could barely imagine, where problems were usually solved with phone calls and credit cards rather than calloused hands and borrowed tools. "That's a good school," he said neutrally, connecting his portable pump to the tire valve. "You like it there?" Emma shrugged, the motion small and uncertain. "It's okay. Sometimes it's lonely. Everyone already knows each other from when they were babies, and I only started there this year." Something in her voice reminded Marcus painfully of Sophia, who'd struggled to make friends after they'd moved to their current apartment when money got too tight to stay in their old neighborhood. Kids were kids. No matter what zip code they lived in, they all just wanted to belong somewhere. The pump wheezed quietly as it worked, and Marcus kept up the gentle conversation, asking about her favorite subjects and whether she had any pets. Emma brightened when she talked about her goldfish, Mr. Bubbles, and how she was teaching him to swim through hoops. She seemed younger when she laughed, less like a miniature adult and more like the 8-year-old she actually was. "There we go," Marcus said, disconnecting the pump and spinning the wheel to test it. "Good as new, but we should probably clean up that knee before you get back on." Emma looked down at her scrape as if she'd forgotten about it entirely. "It doesn't hurt much anymore." "It might not hurt, but we don't want it to get infected," Marcus said, opening his first aid kit. "My daughter Sophia fell off her bike last month and scraped her knee just like this. She was so brave about it, didn't cry at all." He pulled out an antiseptic wipe and a small bandage. "This might sting a little, but it'll be quick." Emma held perfectly still as he cleaned the scrape, only wincing slightly when the antiseptic touched the raw skin. "You have a daughter?" "I do. She's 9, just a little older than you. She loves riding her bike too, though hers doesn't look quite as fancy as this one." Marcus carefully placed the bandage over the clean scrape, smoothing the edges down gently. "There. All fixed." Emma examined the bandage with approval. "It has rainbows on it. Sophia picked those out special. She said regular bandages are boring." Marcus began packing his tools back into the kit, checking his watch discreetly. 2 p.m. The late fees were climbing, but he couldn't just leave Emma here, lost and alone in a neighborhood where all the houses looked the same. "Now," he said, standing and brushing dirt off his knees, "let's figure out how to get you home. Do you remember your address?" Emma's face fell. "I know it's on Maple something, Maple Grove, Maple Hill." She bit her lip, frustrated with herself. "Mom's always telling the driver where to go, but I never really pay attention. Driver. Of course she had a driver." Marcus filed that information away, along with the expensive bike and the private school, building a picture of a life so different from his own that it might as well have been on another planet. But right now, none of that mattered. What mattered was getting a scared little girl home safely. "That's okay," he said reassuringly. "Do you have your mom's phone number memorized?" Emma shook her head, looking embarrassed. "It's in my phone, but—" She patted her pockets and her face crumpled. "I think I dropped it when I fell. It must be back where I crashed." Marcus looked down the street, calculating distances and time. Finding a dropped phone in a neighborhood this size could take hours, and the sun was already starting to sink lower in the sky. He thought about Sophia, probably wondering where he was, maybe starting to worry. He thought about the late fees, about the money he couldn't afford to lose. Then he looked at Emma, 8 years old and lost, trying so hard to be brave even though he could see the fear trembling at the edges of her composure. The decision made itself. "All right," he said, "here's what we're going to do. I'm going to drive you around the neighborhood until we find a street that looks familiar. My truck's not much to look at, but it runs fine, and I promise I'm one of the good guys." He pulled out his wallet and showed her his contractor's license and a photo of Sophia. "See? That's my daughter. I know exactly how worried your mom must be right now." Emma studied the photo with the seriousness of a judge. "She looks nice." "She is. And she'd want me to help you get home safe, just like I'd want someone to help her if she was lost." Marcus closed his wallet and gestured toward his truck. "What do you say? Ready to do some detective work?" Emma nodded, her fear giving way to something that might have been excitement. "Can I bring my bike?" "Of course. We'll put it right in the back." Marcus lifted the bicycle easily, settling it into the truck bed among his tools and paint cans. He opened the passenger door for Emma, making sure the seat belt fit properly across her small frame. The truck's interior suddenly seemed shabbier than usual cracked vinyl seats, a dashboard held together with electrical tape, the lingering smell of paint and sawdust that never quite went away. no matter how many air fresheners he hung from the mirror. If Emma noticed, she didn't comment. Instead, she sat quietly as Marcus started the engine, her hands folded in her lap like she was in church. "Thank you for helping me," she said softly. "Mom says there are good people and bad people in the world, and you're definitely one of the good ones." The simple honesty of it hit Marcus harder than he expected. When was the last time someone had called him one of the good ones? Most days he felt like he was barely keeping his head above water, making mistakes as often as he made progress, failing more than he succeeded. But maybe being good wasn't about being perfect. Maybe it was just about stopping when someone needed help, even when you had every reason to keep driving. "Your mom sounds smart," he said, pulling away from the curb. "Let's see if we can find her." They drove slowly through the winding streets of Willowbrook Heights, Emma pressing her face to the window and studying each house with intense concentration. The neighborhood was a maze of curves and cul-de-sacs, every street looking like the next, every house a variation on the same theme of expensive restraint. Marcus found himself wondering what it would be like to live here, to have a lawn that someone else maintained, and a driveway that could hold more than one car without scraping the mirrors. To have enough money that a flat tire was an inconvenience rather than a potential catastrophe. "That one looks sort of familiar," Emma said, pointing to a massive colonial with white columns and a circular drive. "But they all kind of look the same, don't they?" Marcus nodded. "They do. It's like someone built the same house over and over again, just changing the colors a little." Emma giggled, the sound bright and unexpected in the truck's quiet cab. "That's exactly what I told my mom. She said it's called architectural consistency, which I think just means boring." As they turned onto another street, Maple Lane, according to the sign, Emma suddenly sat up straighter. "Wait, I think this is it. Yes, this is my street." She pointed ahead excitedly. "My house is the one with the big iron gates and the stone lions." Marcus followed her pointing finger and felt his stomach drop slightly. The house at the end of the street wasn't just large, it was enormous, a sprawling mansion that looked like it belonged in a movie about old money families. The iron gates Emma had mentioned were clearly automated, and even from a distance, he could see security cameras mounted at regular intervals along the property line. As they approached, Marcus noticed something else. There were men in dark suits standing near the gates, their posture alert and professional in a way that made his contractor's instincts prickle with unease. These weren't gardeners or maintenance workers. They were security, and they were watching his truck with the kind of attention that meant they'd been watching for some time. "Emma," Marcus said carefully, "your mom wouldn't happen to work in, politics or something like that, would she?" Emma nodded casually, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. "She's the governor, Governor Walsh. She says it's like being the boss of the whole state, except everyone gets to tell you what you're doing wrong." She unbuckled her seatbelt as Marcus pulled up to the gates, already reaching for the door handle. "Thank you so much for helping me. Mom's going to want to thank you too." Governor Walsh. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face as the pieces clicked into place. He'd just spent the last hour driving around with the governor's daughter in his beat-up contractor's truck, and judging by the number of security personnel now approaching his vehicle, that was either a very good thing or a very bad thing. The gates began to swing open as if by magic, and Marcus realized that their approach had probably been monitored from the moment they'd turned onto the street. Maybe from the moment he'd first stopped to help Emma. The security cameras he'd noticed weren't just for show, they were part of a system that was undoubtedly recording everything, storing it, analyzing it, preparing for whatever came next. Emma seemed oblivious to the tension radiating from the men in suits who now flanked Marcus's truck. She waved cheerfully at them as they opened her door, chattering excitedly about her adventure and the nice man who'd fixed her bike. Marcus sat frozen behind the wheel, hands still gripping the steering wheel, as the reality of the situation crashed over him like cold water. He wasn't just a contractor who'd helped a lost kid anymore. He was a potential security threat who'd made unsupervised contact with one of the most powerful political figures in the state. And judging by the way the security team was positioning themselves around his truck, they weren't taking any chances about his intentions, no matter how innocent they'd actually been. The first SUV appeared in Marcus's rearview mirror, like a black thundercloud, moving fast enough to make his contractor's instincts scream danger. Then came the second, and the third, until a convoy of identical vehicles was bearing down on them with the kind of coordinated precision that spoke of military training and serious intent. Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel as he watched the lead vehicle close the distance, its tinted windows revealing nothing about the occupants inside. "Emma," he said carefully, trying to keep his voice calm even as his heart began hammering against his ribs, "are you expecting anyone?" But Emma was already bouncing in her seat, relief flooding her young face. "That's Mom, she found us." She waved enthusiastically toward the approaching convoy, completely oblivious to the way Marcus's world was about to shift off its axis. The SUVs pulled into formation around Marcus's battered pickup truck with military precision, creating a semicircle that left no room for escape and not that Marcus had any intention of running. He was too confused to run, too stunned by the sudden transformation of a quiet suburban street into what looked like a scene from a movie about international espionage. Men in dark suits were already emerging from the vehicles before they'd fully stopped, their movements sharp and purposeful, hands resting near their jackets in ways that made Marcus's mouth go dry. "Sir? Please, step out of the vehicle with your hands visible," commanded a voice that carried the kind of authority Marcus had only heard from police officers and drill sergeants. The man speaking was tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of posture that came from years of military service and the cold eyes of someone who'd seen enough danger to recognize it in any form. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face as the reality crashed over him. These weren't just security guards, they were federal agents, or something close to it, and they thought he was a threat. The man who'd fixed bathroom tiles and patched drywall for a living was now being treated like a potential kidnapper, surrounded by professionals who probably had enough firepower to level a city block. "Wait," Marcus said, his voice cracking slightly as he raised his hands where they could be seen. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I was just helping." "Sir, exit the vehicle now." The agent's voice had gone from commanding to dangerous, and Marcus could see other figures moving into position around the truck. Their coordination, speaking of countless hours of training for situations exactly like this one. Emma was looking between Marcus and the agents with growing confusion, her earlier excitement fading into something that looked like fear. "Why are they being mean to Marcus?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. "He helped me. He fixed my bike." Marcus looked at her, this little girl who trusted him completely, and felt something protective and fierce rise in his chest. Whatever was happening here, whatever these people thought he'd done, Emma didn't deserve to be scared. She'd been through enough for one day. "It's okay, Emma," he said softly, his hands still raised as he slowly opened the driver's door. "These people are just doing their job. They want to make sure you're safe." But as Marcus stepped out of the truck, keeping his movements slow and deliberate, one of the agents moved closer to Emma's side of the vehicle. The man's hand was resting on something at his hip, a weapon, Marcus realized with a cold shock, and his eyes were scanning Marcus like he was cataloging potential threats. "Step away from the child," the agent ordered, and something primal and protective exploded in Marcus's chest. "Hey," Marcus said, his voice sharper now, forgetting about protocols and procedures and the very real possibility that these people might shoot first and ask questions later. "You don't need to scare her. She's been through enough today." He moved instinctively, placing himself between Emma and the agent, his body language shifting from confused compliance to something more defensive. It was probably the stupidest thing he could have done, positioning himself as an obstacle between trained security personnel and their protectee, but Marcus Rivera had been a father longer than he'd been anything else, and every instinct he possessed was screaming at him to shield the frightened child from the sea of intimidating strangers who'd suddenly surrounded her. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. 3 agents converged on him simultaneously, their movements so fast and coordinated that Marcus barely had time to process what was happening before strong hands were gripping his arms and forcing him to his knees on the pristine asphalt. His toolbox scattered across the ground, wrenches and screwdrivers clattering like metallic rain. "Don't hurt him!" Emma's voice cut through the chaos, high and desperate and filled with tears. "He didn't do anything wrong, he helped me." But her protests were lost in the controlled chaos of a security operation that had shifted into high gear. Marcus found himself pressed against the side of his truck, hands zip-tied behind his back, while agents efficiently searched his pockets and ran some kind of electronic device over his clothing. The whole thing felt surreal, like he'd fallen through a crack in reality and landed in someone else's nightmare. Marcus Rivera. One of the agents read from Marcus's wallet, his voice clinical and detached. Age 34, licensed contractor, address on Elm Street. He looked up at his colleagues. No priors, no red flags in the database. "That doesn't mean anything," another agent replied curtly. "Unknown individual with unsupervised access to the protectee. We follow protocol until we know more." Marcus wanted to laugh at the absurdity of them, a threat to anyone. He could barely afford groceries, let alone whatever kind of sophisticated operation these people were apparently trained to prevent. But the zip ties around his wrists were real enough, and so was the way Emma was crying now, her earlier trust and gratitude replaced by confusion and fear. Then the crowd of agents parted like a curtain being drawn back, and Marcus saw her. Governor Catherine Walsh moved through the security perimeter with the kind of controlled urgency that spoke of countless crisis situations, her heels clicking against the asphalt with military precision. She was smaller than Marcus had expected, shorter than she appeared on television, but she carried herself with an authority that made her seem to fill more space than her actual physical presence should have allowed. Her dark hair was pulled back in a style that managed to look both professional and maternal, and her eyes were scanning the scene with the rapid assessment of someone accustomed to processing complex situations quickly. But all of that disappeared the moment she saw Emma. "Oh, baby," Governor Walsh breathed. And suddenly she wasn't the leader of the state anymore. She was just a mother who'd been terrified for her child. She rushed toward the truck, her composed political facade cracking to reveal something raw and desperate underneath. "Emma, sweetheart, are you hurt? Are you okay?" Emma launched herself from the truck's passenger seat into her mother's arms with the force of a small missile, tears streaming down her dirt-streaked face. "Mom, I got lost and my bike broke and I was so scared, but Marcus helped me. He fixed my tire and put a rainbow bandage on my knee, and he was going to help me find you, but now everyone's being mean to him." Governor Walsh held her daughter close, one hand stroking Emma's tangled hair while her eyes took in the scene around them, the scattered tools, the agents maintaining their perimeter, and Marcus himself, still kneeling beside his truck with his hands secured behind his back. Her expression shifted through several emotions in quick succession: relief, confusion, and something that might have been recognition of how badly this situation could spiral out of control. "Ma'am," the lead agent approached with the kind of deference reserved for people who could end careers with a phone call. "We've secured the individual who made contact with your daughter. He appears to be a local contractor with no criminal history, but we're treating this as a potential security breach until we can conduct a full investigation." "A security breach?" Governor Walsh's voice carried a sharp edge that Marcus suspected had ended more than one political career. "Agent Harrison, this man helped my daughter when she was hurt and lost. He didn't breach anything, he stopped to help a child in need." But even as she defended him, Marcus could see the wheels turning behind Governor Walsh's eyes. She was calculating, weighing the implications, considering angles that a simple contractor couldn't even imagine. This wasn't just about a good Samaritan helping a lost child anymore. This was about political optics, security protocols, and the hundreds of ways an innocent situation could be twisted into something damaging. A new figure emerged from one of the SUVs, moving with the rapid efficiency of someone who'd built a career on managing crises before they became disasters. The woman was younger than Governor Walsh, maybe early 30s, with platinum blonde hair and a suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. She carried herself with the brittle energy of someone who survived on caffeine and adrenaline, and her eyes were already cataloging problems and solutions with the speed of a computer processor. "Governor," the woman said, her voice tight with barely controlled panic, "we need to discuss damage control immediately. If word gets out that Emma was unprotected and made contact with an unknown civilian—" "Sarah," Governor Walsh cut her off with a tone that could have frozen water, "my daughter is safe. That's all that matters right now." But Marcus could see that wasn't entirely true. Governor Walsh's relief at finding Emma unharmed was genuine and overwhelming, but underneath it was the sharp awareness of someone who'd learned to see every situation through the lens of political consequences. She was a mother first, but she was also a public figure whose every move was scrutinized, analyzed, and weaponized by people who'd never met her daughter or cared about her fears. "Marcus was really nice to me, Mom," Emma said, pulling back just enough to look up at her mother's face. "He said he has a daughter named Sophia who's older than me, and he showed me her picture, and he fixed my bike tire with his special tools." She pointed toward the scattered toolbox, then back at Marcus. "Why do all these people look angry at him?" "He helped me." The simplicity of the question hung in the air like a challenge. Why, indeed, were they treating kindness like a crime? Marcus watched Governor Walsh's face as she processed her daughter's words, saw the moment when maternal instinct collided with political reality and had to find some kind of middle ground. "Agent Harrison," Governor Walsh said finally, her voice carrying the kind of authority that came from years of making decisions that affected millions of people, "release Mr. Rivera immediately." "Ma'am, protocol requires." "Protocol requires that I maintain the safety and security of my family," Governor Walsh interrupted. "Mr. Rivera helped my daughter when she was in distress. He could have driven past, could have assumed someone else would handle it, but he stopped. He used his own tools and supplies to fix her bicycle, tended to her injuries, and was in the process of safely returning her home when you arrived." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the assembled agents. "If that's the kind of behavior we're going to treat as suspicious, then we've lost sight of what we're supposed to be protecting." The agent hesitated for a moment longer, clearly uncomfortable with deviating from established procedures, but ultimately he nodded to one of his colleagues. Marcus felt the zip ties being cut away from his wrists, the sudden release of pressure almost as disorienting as their initial application had been. Marcus rubbed his wrists gingerly, trying to process what had just happened. One moment he'd been a potential threat requiring neutralization, and the next he was being defended by one of the most powerful people in the state. The whiplash of it left him feeling slightly nauseous. "Mr. Rivera," Governor Walsh approached him directly, Emma still clinging to her side. "I owe you an enormous apology for how you've been treated, and an even larger debt of gratitude for helping my daughter." She extended her hand, and Marcus found himself shaking hands with the governor while surrounded by federal agents and scattered tools. Emma told me you took time away from your own responsibilities to make sure she got home safely. That's not something I'll forget." Marcus nodded, still too stunned to form coherent words. This morning he'd been worried about late pickup fees and bathroom renovations, and now he was being personally thanked by the governor. It felt like someone had picked up his life and shaken it like a snow globe, leaving everything familiar floating in chaos around him. Marcus started, then stopped, trying to find words that matched the surreal magnitude of the moment. She was scared. "I have a daughter, and I know how frightening it must have been for her to be lost like that. I couldn't just drive past. Most people would have," Governor Walsh said quietly, and there was something in her voice that suggested she'd learned that lesson the hard way. "Most people see a problem that isn't theirs and keep moving. The fact that you stopped, that you took the time to help." She shook her head. "That says something about who you are, Mr. Rivera." The aide Sarah was hovering nearby with the barely contained energy of someone watching a public relations disaster unfold in real time. Marcus could practically see her composing press releases and damage control strategies, calculating the political cost of this encounter and finding the math wanting. "Governor," Sarah said, her voice pitched low but carrying enough urgency to cut through the moment, "we really need to discuss the implications of this situation. If the media learns that Emma was unprotected and made contact with an unvetted civilian, then we'll tell them the truth," Governor Walsh replied firmly. "That my daughter encountered a problem, and a good man stopped to help her. If that's somehow controversial, then we're all in more trouble than I thought." But Marcus could see the tension in Governor Walsh's shoulders, the way her free hand was clenched into a fist at her side. She meant what she said about the truth, but she also understood the reality of modern politics better than anyone. Truth had a way of getting twisted, especially when it involved the families of public figures. A simple story about helping a lost child could become a narrative about security failures, parental negligence, or any number of other angles designed to damage her credibility. Emma, oblivious to the political undercurrents swirling around her, was tugging on her mother's jacket. "Mom, can Marcus come have dinner with us? I want to show him Mr. Bubbles, and I want Sophia to come too, so she can meet my goldfish." The suggestion landed among the assembled adults like a small bomb. Agent Harrison's expression went from professional neutrality to something approaching horror, while Sarah looked like she might actually faint. Even Governor Walsh seemed momentarily at a loss for words. "Sweetheart," she said carefully, "that's a very kind invitation, but Mr. Rivera probably has his own family to get home to." Marcus found his voice finally, though it came out rougher than he'd intended. "I do, actually. My daughter Sophia, she's waiting for me at school. I'm already late picking her up." The reminder of his real-life Sophia waiting, late fees accumulating, the normal struggles of single parenthood felt like cold water splashing across the surreal scene. He wasn't part of this world of security details and political calculations. He was just a contractor who'd stopped to help a kid, and now he needed to get back to his own responsibilities. "Of course," Governor Walsh said immediately. "Agent Harrison, please make sure Mr. Rivera gets a police escort to wherever he needs to go. The least we can do is make sure he doesn't face any additional delays because of the time he spent helping Emma." "That's not necessary," Marcus said quickly, the thought of arriving at Sophia's school with a police escort making his stomach clench. "I can find my way just fine." But Governor Walsh was already moving, her political instincts taking over. "I insist. And Mr. Rivera?" She paused, something shifting in her expression. "I'd like to find a way to properly thank you for what you did today. For not just driving past when my daughter needed help." Marcus nodded, though he wasn't sure what kind of thanks she had in mind. Right now, all he wanted was to get back to his truck, drive to Sophia's school, and pretend this whole afternoon had been some kind of strange dream. But as he gathered his scattered tools and loaded Emma's repaired bicycle back into his truck bed, he had the unsettling feeling that this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning, and he had no idea what came next. Marcus woke to the sound of voices outside his apartment window, not the usual morning symphony of traffic and garbage trucks, but actual human voices, multiple conversations layering over each other like competing radio stations. He rolled over in bed, squinting at the alarm clock that read 6:23 a.m., and tried to convince himself he was still dreaming. No one had any reason to be congregating outside his building at this hour, especially not with the kind of energy that was seeping through his thin walls. But as consciousness fully returned, so did the memory of yesterday's surreal encounter with Governor Walsh and her daughter. The zip ties around his wrists, the questions from federal agents, Emma's tearful defense of his character, all of it came flooding back with the clarity of a nightmare that refused to fade in daylight. Marcus sat up slowly, his body aching from the tension he'd carried home like a weight in his shoulders. The voices outside were getting louder, more insistent. Marcus padded to his bedroom window and carefully pulled back the corner of the blinds, then immediately jerked backward as if he'd been slapped. The parking lot of his modest apartment complex was filled with white vans bearing the logos of local news stations, their satellite dishes extended like mechanical flowers reaching toward the morning sky. Reporters were setting up cameras, checking microphones, and drinking coffee from paper cups while they waited for something to happen. "What the hell?" Marcus breathed, his mind racing to catch up with a reality that had apparently shifted overnight. His phone, which had been mercifully silent since he'd fallen into an exhausted sleep, suddenly erupted in a cacophony of rings and buzzes. Text messages, missed calls, voicemails. The screen was lighting up faster than he could process the notifications. Marcus grabbed the phone with shaking hands and scrolled through the chaos. Numbers he didn't recognize, area codes from across the state, messages from reporters requesting interviews and comments about his heroic actions. But it was the text from his neighbor, Mrs. Chen, that made his blood run cold. "Marcus, there are news people everywhere asking about you. They're saying you saved the governor's daughter. What's going on?" With growing dread, Marcus opened his web browser and searched his own name. The results hit him like a physical blow. Local hero rescues governor's daughter. Contractor saves lost child in Willowbrook Heights. Good Samaritan steps up when governor's security fails. Story after story, each with slightly different details, but the same basic narrative. Marcus Rivera, struggling single father and handyman, had come to the aid of Emma Walsh when she was lost and vulnerable. Some of the coverage was positive, painting him as an everyday hero who'd done the right thing without expecting recognition. But other stories carried a sharper edge, questioning how the governor's daughter had ended up alone and unprotected in the first place, suggesting security failures and parental negligence. Political commentators were already using the incident as ammunition, some praising Governor Walsh's grace under pressure, while others implied she was an irresponsible mother who put politics before her child's safety. Marcus felt sick as he read through the coverage, watching his private act of kindness being dissected and analyzed by people who'd never met him or Emma. The simple story of helping a scared child fix her bike had become a political football, kicked back and forth by pundits and commentators who cared more about scoring points than about the truth. His phone rang again, this time showing a number he recognized: his biggest client, the one who'd hired him to renovate 3 rental properties over the next 2 months. Marcus answered with a sinking feeling in his stomach. "Marcus?" The voice of Robert Hendricks, property developer and Marcus's most reliable source of income, was tight with something that might have been anger or embarrassment. "I'm looking at the morning news, and there's a story about you and the governor's daughter." "Mr. Hendricks, I can explain." "I don't need an explanation." Hendricks cut him off. "What I need is for my contractors to fly under the radar, not attract media attention to my properties. I've got reporters calling my office asking about my relationship with the local hero, and I can't afford that kind of scrutiny right now." Marcus felt the words like a punch to the gut. "Sir, all I did was help a lost child. I didn't ask for any of this attention." "I believe you," Hendricks said, and there was genuine regret in his voice. "But intention doesn't matter when you've got news vans following you around. I can't have that circus showing up at my job sites." "I'm sorry, Marcus, but I'm going to have to terminate our contract." The line went dead, and Marcus stared at his phone in disbelief. 2 months of steady work, enough money to catch up on rent, and maybe even put something aside for Sophia's birthday gone, because he'd stopped to help a little girl fix her bicycle tire. The irony was bitter enough to choke on. Sophia emerged from her bedroom in pajamas covered with cartoon cats, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Dad, why are there so many cars outside?" Marcus quickly closed his laptop and tried to arrange his face into something resembling calm normalcy. "Just some people who heard about yesterday when I helped that little girl. Nothing to worry about." But Sophia was 9 years old and sharp as a tack, with the uncanny ability all children possess to see through adult attempts at reassurance. She moved to the window and peered through the blinds with the fearless curiosity of someone too young to understand real danger. "Those are news people," she said matter-of-factly. "Like on TV. Are you famous now?" "No, sweetheart," Marcus said quickly. "I'm not famous. I just helped someone, and for some reason, people think that's interesting enough to talk about." Sophia considered this with the seriousness of a philosopher. "Is helping people supposed to be interesting? I thought it was just what you're supposed to do. Out of the mouths of babes." Marcus felt a surge of pride in his daughter, this wise little person who understood intuitively what seemed to escape so many adults. "You're absolutely right. It is just what you're supposed to do." Getting Sophia ready for school became a military operation. Marcus had to call Mrs. Chen to ask if Sophia could leave through the back entrance of her apartment and walk to school with Mrs. Chen's grandson, Tommy. The reporters hadn't thought to stake out the rear of the building yet, and Marcus watched from his bedroom window as Sophia disappeared safely around the corner with her backpack and lunchbox, looking back once to wave at him before vanishing from sight. The rest of the morning was a siege. Marcus's phone continued its relentless assault of rings and buzzes. Reporters knocked on his door with the persistence of door-to-door salesmen, their voices echoing through the thin walls as they called out requests for interviews and comments. Marcus ignored them all, pacing his small living room like a caged animal and wondering how his life had become a spectacle overnight. By noon, when the intensity of the media attention showed no signs of abating, Marcus was ready to climb the walls. He'd lost a major contract. His daughter was probably fielding questions at school about her suddenly famous father. And he was trapped in his own apartment by people who seemed to think his private life was public property. That's when the knock came, not the aggressive, demanding rap of a journalist, but a softer, more respectful sound. Marcus peered through the peephole and felt his world tilt again. Governor Catherine Walsh stood in his hallway, flanked by 2 discreet security agents and looking nothing like the polished political figure he'd seen on television. She wore jeans and a simple blue sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, and she looked tired in a way that transcended physical exhaustion. Marcus opened the door slowly, hyper-aware of the chaos that would ensue if the reporters outside spotted the governor at his apartment. "Mrs. Walsh, what are you doing here?" Governor Walsh. One of the agents corrected automatically, but she waved him off. Catherine is fine, she said to Marcus. And I'm here because I owe you an apology and a conversation that should have happened yesterday before all this got out of hand. Marcus stepped aside to let her enter, his mind reeling. Having the governor in his modest living room felt surreal, like something from a dream or a political satire. She moved through his space without judgment, her eyes taking in the thrift store furniture and hand-me-down decorations with the same respectful attention she might give a state capitol building. "Please, sit," Marcus said, gesturing toward his couch. "Can I get you coffee? It's not fancy, but it's hot." Catherine smiled, and for a moment she looked less like a political figure and more like a tired mother. "Coffee would be wonderful, thank you." As Marcus busied himself in the kitchen, he could hear one of the agents speaking quietly into a radio, probably coordinating with the team outside to manage the media situation. The other agent positioned himself near the window, professional and unobtrusive but clearly alert. "I suppose you've seen the news coverage," Catherine said when Marcus returned with 2 mismatched mugs. "Hard to miss when it's camping outside your door," Marcus replied, settling into the chair across from her. "Though I have to say, I never expected helping a kid with a flat tire would make headlines." Catherine's expression darkened. "That's my fault, and I'm sorry. My staff leaked the story they thought it would be good publicity. Show me as a relatable mother whose daughter was helped by a real person. They didn't consider how that publicity might affect your life." Marcus felt a flash of anger, not at Catherine but at the casual way his privacy had been sacrificed for political gain. "So this whole circus is because someone thought it would make you look good?" "Yes," Catherine said simply, "and I fired the person responsible this morning." That caught Marcus off guard. "You fired someone over this?" "I fired someone for treating your family like a prop in my political theater," Catherine corrected. "What you did for Emma was genuine kindness, not a photo opportunity. The fact that one of my own people turned it into one is unacceptable." Marcus studied her face, looking for the political calculation he'd expected to find. But Catherine Walsh seemed genuinely upset, more angry at her own team than defensive about the criticism being leveled at her parenting. "I lost a job this morning," Marcus said quietly. "My biggest client dropped me because he doesn't want the media attention." Catherine's face fell. "Oh, Marcus, I'm so sorry. This is exactly what I was afraid of." "Afraid of?" "That helping Emma would end up hurting you instead of helping you." Catherine set down her coffee mug and leaned forward. "I've been in politics long enough to know how these stories work. The media builds you up as a hero one day and tears you down the next. I was hoping to control the narrative, to make sure you were protected, but clearly I failed." Marcus found himself reassessing his assumptions about Governor Catherine Walsh. She wasn't the calculating politician he'd expected, concerned only with her own image and political survival. She was a mother who understood the cost of public attention, someone who'd learned through experience how quickly praise could turn into scrutiny. "How do you do it?" Marcus asked suddenly. "Raise a kid when everyone's watching, when every mistake gets magnified and analyzed?" Catherine's laugh was rueful. "Not very well, apparently. Emma was supposed to have security with her yesterday, but she slipped away from her detail when they stopped at her friend's house. She wanted to ride her bike home alone, like a normal kid, and somehow she managed to convince them to let her go first while they handled some kind of protocol issue." She shook her head. 30 seconds of normal childhood, and it turned into a security nightmare. "She just wanted to feel normal," Marcus said, understanding flooding through him. "That's all any kid wants." "Exactly. But normal isn't an option when you're the governor's daughter. Every playdate has to be vetted. Every school event needs security clearance. Every friend gets a background check." Catherine's voice carried the weight of someone who'd watched her child pay the price for her own career choices. Sometimes I wonder if I'm giving Emma opportunities or taking them away. Marcus thought about Sophia, about the simple freedom she had to ride her bike around their neighborhood without security details or media attention. It wasn't a freedom that came with money or privilege, it was the basic liberty of anonymity, of being able to make mistakes without the world watching. It's hard enough being a single parent without everyone having opinions about how you're doing it, Marcus said. Catherine looked up sharply. You understand that? I understand wondering if you're screwing up your kid's life. I understand making decisions by yourself and hoping they're the right ones. I understand feeling like you're failing even when you're doing your best. Marcus paused, then added quietly, I understand what it's like when other people think they know better than you do what your child needs. They sat in silence for a moment. Two parents who'd found themselves in an impossible situation through no fault of their own. Despite the vast differences in their circumstances, the governor's mansion versus a modest apartment, security details versus late pickup fees, they were dealing with the same fundamental challenge, raising a child in a world that seemed designed to make good parenting harder than it needed to be. Emma hasn't stopped talking about you, Catherine said finally, about how kind you were, how you listened to her and took her seriously. She said you showed her a picture of Sophia and talked about her like she was the most important person in the world. She is, Marcus said simply. That's what I mean. Emma could tell that about you immediate, that you're the kind of father who puts his child first. She has good instincts about people. Catherine smiled. She wants to meet Sophia properly, not in some staged political event, but just as kids being kids. Marcus thought about the media circus outside, about the lost contract and the reporters who seemed to think his life was public property. I don't know if that's possible anymore. This attention, this scrutiny, it's not fair to Sophia. You're right, Catherine agreed. It's not fair to either of our daughters. But Marcus, this will die down. In a week, maybe two, there will be some other story for people to obsess over. The media has the attention span of a goldfish. And until then? Catherine was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing her words. Until then, I'd like to try to make this right. The job you lost, I can't force your client to reconsider, but I can make sure you have other opportunities. The state contracts with hundreds of independent contractors for maintenance and renovation work. Your background check is already complete, she added with a slight smile, courtesy of yesterday's security screening. Marcus felt a flash of pride warring with practical necessity. I don't want charity. It's not charity. It's recognizing good work when I see it. Emma's bike tire didn't fix itself. You did that with skill and care and the right tools. That tells me you're the kind of contractor who takes pride in his work. Before Marcus could respond, his phone rang. Sophia's school. Marcus answered immediately, his heart jumping into his throat. Mr. Rivera? This is Principal Martinez. Sophia's fine, but we've had some reporters trying to ask her questions during recess. We've moved her inside for the rest of the day, but I wanted you to know what was happening. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of unintended consequences crushing down on him. This was exactly what he'd feared, Sophia paying the price for his moment of kindness. I'll be right there to pick her up, he said. Actually, Catherine interjected quietly after he'd hung up, I might be able to help with that too. She gestured to one of her agents who stepped forward immediately. Agent Morrison, I need you to coordinate with Lincoln Elementary. Ensure that Mr. Rivera's daughter gets home safely without media interference. Ma'am, Agent Morrison replied, that's outside our normal. Our normal what? Catherine's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to having her orders followed without question. Our normal human decency? Sophia Rivera is a 9-year-old girl who's being harassed because her father helped my daughter. That makes her my responsibility. Marcus stared at her, overwhelmed by the simple recognition that Sophia's well-being mattered to someone outside their small family. When was the last time anyone had stepped up to protect his daughter the way Catherine was doing now? "Thank you," he said quietly. Catherine stood, straightening her sweater. "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when this mess is cleaned up and both our daughters can go back to being normal kids." She paused at the door. "Marcus, what you did yesterday stopping to help when you had every reason to keep driving, that meant everything to Emma. And it reminded me that there are still good people in the world, people who do the right thing even when it costs them something." As she prepared to leave, Catherine turned back one more time. "When this settles down, when the reporters find someone else to bother, I'd like Emma and Sophia to meet properly. Not as a political event or a photo opportunity, just as two kids who might become friends." Marcus nodded, though he wondered if their worlds would ever allow for something as simple as a normal playdate. As the governor and her security detail prepared to navigate the media gauntlet outside, Marcus realized that his life had changed in ways he was only beginning to understand. The man who'd woken up this morning worried about lost contracts and late fees was now someone the governor of the state knew by name, someone whose daughter merited protection from federal agents. It should have felt like winning some kind of lottery, but mostly it just felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure whether the ground beneath his feet was solid or about to give way entirely. 3 weeks after the media storm began, it ended with the same sudden finality as a summer thunderstorm. The news vans disappeared from Marcus's parking lot. The reporters moved on to fresher scandals, and the world's attention shifted to other stories that felt more urgent than a contractor who'd helped a lost child. Marcus woke up one Tuesday morning to blessed silence outside his window, no voices discussing camera angles or debating the political implications of flat tire repair. The quiet should have been a relief, but instead, it left Marcus feeling strangely hollow. For better or worse, the attention had made him feel significant, like his actions mattered in some larger way. Now, as normal life resumed its steady rhythm, he found himself wondering if the whole experience had been real or just some elaborate dream brought on by too many late nights and too much instant coffee. But the envelope that arrived that afternoon proved it had been very real indeed. Marcus recognized the state seal immediately, the official letterhead that marked correspondence from Governor Walsh's office. Inside was a letter of recommendation for state contracting work, written in the kind of formal language that carried real weight in bureaucratic circles. But attached to it was a handwritten note in what he assumed was Catherine's personal handwriting. "Marcus, this isn't charity. It's recognition of good work and good character. The state needs contractors who take pride in their craft. C.W." The first job came 2 days later, renovating the break room at the Department of Motor Vehicles downtown. It wasn't glamorous work replacing ceiling tiles, painting walls, updating electrical outlets, but it was steady, well-paying work with a client who valued craftsmanship over speed. Marcus found himself taking extra care with every detail, knowing that this opportunity was a gift he couldn't afford to waste. Sophia noticed the change in their routine immediately. "You seem happier when you come home from work," she observed one evening as they ate dinner at their small kitchen table. "Is it because the governor lady got you a good job?" "Governor Walsh helped me find work that's a better fit," Marcus corrected gently. "But the job itself is something I have to earn every day." Sophia considered this with the seriousness she brought to all matters of adult responsibility. "Do you think I'll ever meet Emma again? I liked her when she came to my school that day." "That day?" Marcus smiled at the memory. True to her word, Catherine had arranged for Sophia to be picked up safely from school during the height of the media attention. But instead of sending just a security detail, she'd come herself, with Emma in the back seat of an unmarked sedan. The two girls had spent 20 minutes chatting in the car while Catherine and Marcus worked out the logistics of getting Sophia home without running the gauntlet of reporters. "Maybe," Marcus said carefully, "but Emma lives in a different world than we do. Her mom has to be very careful about who she spends time with." What Marcus didn't say was that he'd been thinking about Emma and Catherine more than he cared to admit. Something about their brief encounter had stayed with him, not the political drama or media attention, but the quiet moment when Catherine had talked about the challenges of single parenting. He'd seen something real in her eyes, something beyond the polished facade that most politicians wore like armor. The call came on a Saturday morning while Marcus was fixing Sophia's breakfast. The number was blocked, but something made him answer anyway. "Marcus? It's Catherine Walsh." His hand tightened involuntarily around the phone. "Governor Walsh, is everything all right?" "Catherine, please." "And yes, everything's fine. Actually, better than fine. Emma hasn't stopped talking about Sophia since they met at the school. She keeps asking when they can have a proper play date, away from security details and political considerations." Marcus glanced at Sophia, who was pretending to focus on her cereal while obviously straining to listen to every word. "That sounds nice in theory, but I'm not sure how it would work practically." "What if I told you I had an idea about that?" Which was how, 2 hours later, Marcus found himself driving Sophia to a small public park in a middle-class neighborhood about 20 minutes from both their homes. It wasn't the kind of place that typically attracted media attention, high-end shops or political landmarks, just a playground, some walking trails, and families enjoying weekend time together. Catherine and Emma were already there when they arrived, sitting on a bench and sharing what looked like gas station coffee and convenience store donuts. Catherine wore jeans and a baseball cap, looking more like any other suburban mom than the governor of the state. Emma bounced up the moment she saw Sophia, her face lighting up with genuine excitement. "Sophia, I brought my friendship bracelets. Do you want to make some together?" The two girls disappeared toward the playground equipment with the easy camaraderie of children who decided they liked each other. Marcus and Catherine were left alone on the bench, watching their daughters navigate the complex social dynamics of the monkey bars. "This is nice," Catherine said quietly. "Normal. Is normal something you get much of?" Marcus asked. Catherine's laugh was rueful. "Not really. Most of Emma's social interactions are scheduled, supervised, and security cleared. She goes to birthday parties where the other parents have been background checked and the venues have been swept for threats." She paused, watching Emma help Sophia reach the next rung on the monkey bars. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm protecting her or isolating her." Marcus understood that dilemma more than he cared to admit. His own protectiveness of Sophia came from different concerns: financial instability, neighborhood safety, the general unpredictability of single-parent life. But the core worry was the same. How do you keep your child safe without keeping them from experiencing the world? "She seems happy," Marcus offered, watching Emma demonstrate some complicated playground maneuver with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. "She is happy mostly, but she's also lonely in ways I don't think she even understands yet." Catherine turned to look at him directly. "That's why this matters so much to me, Marcus. What you did that day stopping to help her when she was scared reminded Emma that there are good people in the world who aren't on my payroll." The friendship that developed between Emma and Sophia over the following weeks was a study in contrasts. Emma lived in a world of private tutors and scheduled activities, while Sophia's free time was largely unstructured, filled with bike rides around the neighborhood and afternoons at the public library. But somehow, the girls found common ground in their love of books, their shared fascination with elaborate friendship bracelet patterns, and their mutual appreciation for Marcus's terrible dad jokes. The adults, meanwhile, found themselves developing an unexpected rapport. Catherine would text Marcus with questions about contractors for various state projects, genuinely seeking his professional opinion rather than just offering him work. Marcus, in turn, found himself sharing stories about Sophia's school achievements and daily adventures, the kind of ordinary parental pride that Catherine rarely got to experience with people outside her inner circle. It was Catherine who suggested the monthly park meetings, carefully scheduled around her official duties and Sophia's school activities. They became a strange constant in both their lives, two single parents stealing time for their daughters to just be kids together, away from the pressures of politics and poverty that defined their respective worlds. Marcus had been working state contracts for 2 months when the notice appeared on his apartment door. The envelope was thick, official, and carried the kind of weight that made his stomach clench before he even opened it. Inside was a letter from Meridian Development Group, informing all tenants that the building had been sold and would be demolished to make way for luxury condominiums. Residents had 60 days to relocate. 60 days to find a new apartment in a city where rent prices were climbing faster than his income, no matter how steady the state work had become. Marcus sat at his kitchen table, staring at the notice and doing math that didn't add up. Security deposits, moving expenses, first and last month's rent even with his improved income, the financial reality was overwhelming. "Dad?" Sophia appeared in the kitchen doorway, homework in hand. "You look worried." Marcus quickly folded the notice and slipped it under a stack of bills. "Just work stuff, kiddo. Nothing you need to worry about." But Sophia had inherited her father's ability to read people, and she wasn't fooled by his attempt at reassurance. "Are we going to have to move?" The question hung in the air like smoke, visible and toxic. Marcus had always been honest with Sophia about their financial situationage, appropriately honest, but honest nonetheless. She understood that money was tight, that they had to be careful about expenses, that sometimes plans changed because of circumstances beyond their control. "Maybe," Marcus said finally. "But if we do, we'll figure it out together, okay?" Sophia nodded with the solemn acceptance of a child who'd learned not to take stability for granted. That night, after she'd gone to bed, Marcus spread the apartment listings across his kitchen table and tried to find something they could afford. The options were depressing. Places in neighborhoods with higher crime rates, apartments so small Sophia would have to sleep in the living room, or units so far from her school that she'd have to change districts entirely. He was still staring at the listings when his phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. "How are things going? Emma's been asking when she can show Sophia her goldfish." Marcus stared at the message for a long time before responding. He and Catherine had developed an easy friendship over the past few months, but this felt different, personal, in a way that crossed the boundaries they'd carefully maintained. She was the governor. He was a contractor. She lived in a mansion with security details. He was about to be homeless. The gulf between their worlds felt impossibly wide, but something about the late hour and his own exhaustion made him type the truth. "Got an eviction notice today. Buildings being demolished for luxury condos. Looking for a new place." His phone rang less than 5 minutes later. "Marcus, what can I do to help?" The immediate offer of assistance should have felt patronizing, but Catherine's tone carried genuine concern rather than political calculation. Still, Marcus felt his pride bristle. "I appreciate the offer, but this isn't your problem to solve." "Maybe not," Catherine said. "But you're not just anyone to me anymore, Marcus. You're my friend, and Emma's friend. When friends are in trouble, you help if you can. I don't want to be your charity case." "You're not." Catherine's voice was firm. "You're a skilled contractor who's done excellent work for the state. a good father who's raising an amazing daughter, and someone who stepped up when my family needed help. If I can't help someone like that, then what's the point of having any influence at all?" The conversation that followed was delicate, both of them navigating the complex dynamics of friendship across class lines. Catherine offered to make calls, to use her connections to find Marcus a place that would accept his application and fit his budget. Marcus, torn between desperation and dignity, ultimately agreed to let her help with the condition that any assistance be presented as a business referral rather than political intervention. The apartment Catherine's contacts found was in a solid working-class neighborhood just 2 miles from Sophia's school. The rent was at the top of Marcus's budget but manageable, and the landlord, a contractor himself, was willing to work with Marcus on the security deposit. When Marcus drove by to look at the building, he found himself staring at a place that felt like home before he'd even seen the inside. The move happened on a Saturday in November, with Emma and Catherine showing up unannounced to help load boxes into Marcus's truck. Emma and Sophia turned the work into an elaborate game, racing to see who could carry the most lightweight items while the adults handled the heavy lifting. Catherine, dressed in old jeans and a sweater with paint stains, attacked the job with the same focused energy she probably brought to budget negotiations. "You didn't have to do this," Marcus said as they loaded the last of the furniture. "Yes, I did," Catherine replied, wiping sweat from her forehead. "This is what friends do." The new apartment was small but bright, with windows that actually opened and floors that didn't creak with every step. Sophia claimed the smaller bedroom with the enthusiasm of someone who'd never had reliable housing, immediately beginning to plan how she'd arrange her books and art supplies. Emma helped with suggestions that ranged from practical to fantastical, the two girls turning room decoration into collaborative architecture. As the sun set on moving day, the four of them sat on Marcus's new living room floor, eating pizza from paper plates. The apartment was filled with boxes and the chaotic energy of transition, but it felt more like home than anywhere Marcus had lived in years. "This is nice," Emma said, unconsciously, echoing her mother's words from that first park meeting. "It feels happy here." "It does," Sophia agreed, reaching for another slice of pizza. "It feels like the kind of place where good things happen." Marcus looked around at his modest new home, then at the unlikely family that had formed around his kitchen table. Catherine was helping Sophia organize her art supplies, while Emma provided commentary and suggestions. It was domestic in a way that felt both foreign and familiar, like something he'd given up hoping for without realizing it. Later, after Emma and Catherine had gone home and Sophia was asleep in her new bedroom, Marcus stood at his living room window, looking out at a neighborhood where kids still played in the streets and neighbors knew each other's names. The path that had led him here from a chance encounter with a lost child to friendship with the governor seemed impossible in retrospect. But perhaps the most impossible thing was how natural it all felt now, how completely this new life fit around him and Sophia like it had been waiting for them all along. His phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. "Thank you for letting us be part of today. Emma hasn't stopped talking about how Sophia's room is going to be the best room ever. Sleep well in your new home." Marcus typed back, "Thank you for everything. More than I can say." He meant it. 3 months ago, he'd been a contractor struggling to make ends meet, invisible to anyone who mattered, defined entirely by his limitations and failures. Tonight, he was still a contractor, still working to build a stable life for his daughter, but he was also someone's friend, someone who mattered, someone who belonged. The bridge between their worlds hadn't been built with politics or money or grand gestures. It had been built with small kindnesses, shared pizza, and the recognition that beneath all the surface differences, they were just two parents trying to do right by their children. Sometimes, Marcus reflected as he turned off the lights and headed to bed. That was enough. Sometimes, that was everything.